TJ, there's a new series out that the Athletic has. It's a 6-episode podcast series on the Andrew Luck story, a guy who was maybe the most well-regarded prospect to ever come out of college into the NFL at the quarterback position, and a guy who turned that franchise around from, the 1 year where Peyton was out as the worst team in the NFL to, he had some unbelievable playoff performances. And then, of course, the early retirement where now he appears to be super happy just being a dude and being a dad. Zak Keefer covers the Colts and the NFL for The Athletic. It's his podcast. It comes out Monday. He joins us now on the Dan Patrick Show on Fox Sports Radio. Zach, take me into thinking of why a 6-part podcast on Andrew Luck right now.
Zach, are you with us?
Yeah.
Zach, maybe.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Why a 6-part series on Luck right now?
Yeah, Doug, if I'm being completely honest, I think it's one of the most fascinating stories the NFL's seen in 25 years. I mean, and hear me out on that. I think, so much of the media cycle centers on, the season and the playoffs and the Super Bowl and trades and signings and free agency and the draft, right? And it could kind of feel monotonous. But, what about the stories that get lost? The messy stories in between. And I feel like this was such a seismic moment, and I feel like, to this day in Indianapolis, I still get asked, where is he? He disappeared. What happened to him? He's only 32 years old. And I felt like another look back, what exactly happened to this guy who was as good a prospect as we had since John Elway? Why did he walk away when he was 29 years old? It's just, I don't know if we've ever seen anything like it in the NFL for a guy like that to walk away 15 days before the season starts.
So have you been able to listen, watch anything with this podcast series that The Athletic has done on him, or are you privy to any information on why that was the case? It was been reported, I'm injured, my body's been banged up. Anything you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the podcast series. I narrated
there you
it all.
go. You know everything.
I know it's been my life for the last 5 months. Yeah, it's not a simple answer. A lot of people will just throw out the offensive line, and that was a big part of it early in his career. I mean, the night he retired, he had gone through a lacerated kidney, a torn abdomen muscle, a torn labrum in his shoulder, God knows how many concussions. The list of injuries is staggering, even for an NFL player. And I wanted to get into that, but at the other point, he just walked away. He was a 29-year-old whose job had made him miserable, and he just walked away to be happy in his life. And that's something we're seeing a little bit more now of with guys at that age. Luke Kuechly retired a little early, but we've just never seen it at a level like this. And I asked Peter King, the veteran writer, have you ever seen a more stunning retirement in league history? And he said no. And he said the other two that come close were Barry Sanders, but Barry Sanders had played 10 years. I mean, he led the league in rushing. He had proven everything he needed to prove. And the other was Jim Brown, and he left at the top of his game, maybe a little early, but he had also proven everything he needed to prove. With Luck, we're left with this great what if, with this what could have been. And I think that's sort of the lingering thought that so many fans, so many people that watched him still have to this day.
Jack, it's a great point. I mean, to even add to your point, how hard are you to replace, right? They've brought in future Hall of Famers that couldn't do it, Yeah. So we'll see if Matt Ryan can do it, but, they went out and got Phillip Rivers. He couldn't do it. I mean, they're just trying to find somebody, and what's probably is the hardest thing for Colts to accept is they finally got most of the rest of it right or better. But it was
exactly.
it was too late. There was also wasn't there a snowboard accident there in the middle where he got hurt, and that's also part of the story?
Yeah, and we dig into that in the podcast. That was, a little overblown. It happened, but the real reason the shoulder was so bad was because he played through it for a year and a half, and that just made it way worse. And so, I talked to Tom House for a long time, the famed throwing guru. He's worked with Tom Brady and Drew Brees and just about every quarterback in the league. And when they started the rehab, it was so bad. Andrew couldn't roll a football 10 yards, couldn't roll a football 10 yards. And he was like 27 years old. So there's a ton of stories that I had never heard. I thought I knew this story. I had no idea. The long conversations with his college coaches and his teammates in the NFL that peeled back the curtain in a way I've never heard the Andrew Luck story like this.
So it looked like the way the rules are now, did you bring that up? Does he have regrets in the way they've gone out of their way to protect the quarterback and just try to limit the amount of hits that they take and they've taken moving forward? Completely different when he first came into the league and to where it is now.
Oh, you guys remember this. I mean, this guy would run into linebackers on purpose. And his coaches would get on him on the sideline, and he'd say, I just had to get one hit in. I just had to, coach. And there's this fight within himself. What made him a great quarterback made him a real big risk. And it wasn't just one big shot. It was an accumulation of shots over the years. But, I mean, you guys have seen the videos. Everyone out there has probably seen the videos of this guy literally getting walloped by defensive linemen and then saying great hit to the defensive lineman after he gets knocked on his ass. So one-of-a-kind dude, one-of-a-kind guy. And I think there's a lesson in all of this. You asked me why do the podcast now? Right. Because of Joe Burrow, because of Justin Herbert. I mean, these guys, and more so Burrow, but how many times was he sacked in the playoffs? Like, if you don't protect your franchise quarterback from the other team and also himself, because Luck bears some blame in this as well. Like, this is what can happen. What if the Bengals had to say goodbye to Joe Burrow in 4 years? Like, that's kind of what happened with the Colts and Andrew Luck, and the Colts have done a pretty good job of not cratering, right? I mean, they've stayed competitive. They've made the playoffs, but you're seeing how hard it is to move on from a franchise quarterback when you have no like expectation of that event happening.
Yeah, Zak Keefer joining us from The Athletic. He's done a 6-part series on the story of Andrew Luck. And, of course, I'm sure you know, most people know, I had the tweet that said Andrew Luck retiring because rehab was too hard. Right? It's the most millennial thing ever. And people lost their collective minds. But as you point out, this is not the normal thing for football. Like, the football mentality is like the boxer mentality, right? Carry me out of my last fight. Right? Go out of my sword. You know, I mean, that's how those guys want to go out. So whether it was received the way that I wanted it to be or not, I mean, it is, right? Like, all of these other guys, they want to go out on their own terms and prove people. I mean, Phillip Rivers, like, he was washed up. He wanted one last shot of it. You know, I mean, Matt Ryan has tons of money. He doesn't want it. He wants to go out his way. It is fair to say that this was very different from football culture, the way he called it. I mean, like, the timing of it, the whole thing was in fact very different from anyone previously at quarterback.
That's why it's so fascinating. I mean, if you go back to that night, it was the craziest night of my career. I mean, this is a preseason home game. And a week before, he'd been on the field doing this crazy workout, like working out like a bandit. And then a week later, he's walking away. Like, why do agility drills on the field 7 days before you're going to walk away from the game? It just didn't make sense to me. And the way it happened, and, I mean, he was booed off the field. He was booed off the field by the fans. He's the franchise quarterback. He's the face of the team. And he's beloved in the city. I mean, and this is a big part of the podcast, too, and maybe this is a little local, but, I mean, TJ, you know this from playing these teams over the years. Like, Peyton Manning was Indianapolis. In a lot of ways still is. And they essentially kicked him to the curb to bring in this young kid, and nobody second-guessed it. It made sense. Like, nobody criticized the decision because it made sense. You didn't pass up a chance to draft Andrew Luck, and then 7 years later, he's walking away, and he's not even 30, and he retires in a preseason game, and it leaks out, and he gets up there, and he spills his heart and soul at the podium and talks about how miserable his life has been for 4 years trying to get back on the field and not be in pain. And it's just, we've never seen this. We've never heard this from a player. And then, like you said, nothing followed the script. His entire career, none of it followed the script. And that, to me, is why it's so different and so interesting.
In your interactions with him, Zach, doing this podcast, Did you sense I missed the game, I have any regrets? Or is he, because I love the game of football so much, it would, like, if I had to retire early, I'd lose my mind. Like, how was he handling it? Is he comfortable doing what he's doing, and does he miss the game of football?
Yeah, that's probably the question I get more than anything else in Indianapolis these days. He's never done an interview since he retired, and I don't know if he will. We did meet, and I've stayed in touch with him. We did meet for coffee about 2 months ago. He asked that the conversation be off the record, and I'll honor that. But to give you, a gist of the conversation, look, one, he's different. He's different. He's a different guy. I don't think he thinks like everybody else in this league. I think parts of them have to miss the game. Can you imagine being that competitive and that good at something and then just not doing it at 29, 30, 31? Like, it would eat at me. It would just eat me up. Like, I would just miss the thrill of competition, wins, losses, everything in between. But at the same time, during that conversation, I never got the feeling that he'd ever seriously considered coming back. It just wasn't. That's just not how he's wired. The night he retired, he said, I have finality in this. I'm very convinced that this is the right thing. And he's never considered coming back. I'm sure he misses parts of it, but in a very clear way, it was made obvious to me that he is moving on to the next phase of his life. And I think we're going to find out more about what that is specifically pretty soon.
Zach, great stuff. It's going to be fascinating. I as soon as I saw it was out there, I said we got to have him on because this is a story that I paid attention to, and I'm intrigued to listen to what I missed. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Had a blast.